Hello, welcome to this special edition of Spotlight. I'm Mark Hertzgaard, the political correspondent here at Link TV. It is my great pleasure to welcome to Spotlight Harry Belafonte, a man who needs no introduction, singer, actor, activist, and very proud to say a board member here at Link TV for the last 5 years. Harry Belafonte, a quick bio sketch, born in New York City, grew up in Jamaica, came back to New York, started your career on Broadway, first African American to win a Tony Award, first African American to win an Emmy Award for television, and on the activist side of your life worked with some of the great giants of our time, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and of course Nelson Mandela. And then in 1984-85, you were involved in something that some of our youngest viewers may not know of, but was really a path-breaking initiative, the We Are the World album that was done in response to the African famine. As you look back 20 years later at Africa and what you guys as musicians were trying to do with We Are the World, how does it look to you now?
Well, I think what We Are the World created was a very large display on the power of art and the power of music, especially when such power is applied to human welfare and the best in human existence. When I saw the enormity of the famine in Africa in the mid-1980s, beyond the enormity of the death and the cold cruelty of people existing in a place that was so unyielding in its harshness as an act of nature. Equal to that was my overwhelming sense of pain at how indifferent much of the world appeared to be in relationship to the suffering. Nobody seemed to care. Nobody seemed to really think much about the fact that literally millions of fellow human beings were dying from things that were preventable. And rather than let this fact continue to overwhelm me, as it had done to so many others, I began to look at finding solution, if not for the whole thing, then certainly for what portions of it I could effect. To look upon my fellow artists as a resource.
As you look back now, 20 years later, at Africa, enormous problems, HIV, poverty, corruption of leadership, crushing debts imposed by the outside world. How do you keep hope for the prosperity of Africa?
I tell you, my hope lies in the fact that I have a profound belief in the African people themselves. I think there is no demonstration taking place in the world that can identify a people who are more eager to get in control of their lives and their destiny, and who are willing in a very, very significant way to, for the first time, break the umbilical cord of a dependency to the West and to the negotiations that are constantly being visited from representatives of the West, to break that link and to say, we shall become masters of our own destiny.
I want to ask you about a very particular aspect of that that has made news before, a comment that you made a couple of years ago about Secretary of State Colin Powell. When the Bush administration, when George W. Bush came to power in 2000, came to the presidency in 2001, many African Americans were very proud to see that Colin Powell was chosen as the Secretary of State. And Mr. Powell promised a renewed, revived interest on the part of the United States in foreign policy relations with Africa. You, by the year 2002, had very critical things to say about Colin Powell. Kicked up. There's been a lot of back and forth about who actually said what. Can you set the record straight here over exactly how you and Colin Powell got into a little bit of a struggle over this.
Early one morning in San Diego, about 8 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened for a telephone interview on talk radio. One of those, everybody going to work, wake up, I'll give you the weather and I'll give you...
Drive time.
Yeah, exactly. And the drive time. And what I thought was going to be a few minutes spent on discussing the forthcoming concert that evening in San Diego, the first word out of the interviewer's mouth was, "So what do you think of Colin Powell and the job he's doing?" Well, this kind of caught me unawares. And I had to give a response. And I just said quite simply, well, I tell you, I think Colin Powell serves his master well. And this then led the interviewer to ask, "Master? Why do you his master? Exactly what do you mean by that?" And in order to explain and trying to put it in the context that I thought was easily understood, I went back into the history of slavery and the metaphor of, or to call upon metaphor to illustrate what I meant by the service of the master. And it was simply that, and I said this many times since, that there were those slaves who served on the plantation and did all the grueling and the harsh work that was demanded of them. And there were those who were given opportunity to be in the master's house and therefore serve with duties that were more easily delivered, and to also have access to the master's circle and to the master's ears in ways that none on the plantation had. And that it was always hoped that rather than just view those who had access with envy, those on the plantations saw that access as an opportunity for something to be said that would influence the way the master looked upon the harshness of the way in which slaves were being treated. And I think that for Black Americans, it is not unfair to understand that they have expectations, that when so few of us who achieve in this country are given access and given an opportunity to be in the room where decisions are being made, that they would use their power connected to their history of suffering and from the degradations from which we have come from and are still experiencing, that they would make a difference on how we live on the plantations of America. And this was my expectation, and the expectation of others, for Colin Powell. And no such gift was forthcoming.
You personally had that expectation of Powell?
Yes. I learned very long ago through Martin Luther King Jr., who was a great teacher, that for us, in very spiritual and soulful ways, to not leave room for redemption, to be a part of how we negotiate life and relationships with others, is to leave us in a very narrow place of expectation and conduct in relationship to the solution of human problems. So yes, many of us saw in Colin Powell a promise that perhaps if he were in a place where he was less threatened, that he would be able to seize upon that place of power and deliver some works of kindness and good. Since this was not evidencing itself, and this was not the first time some people of power, of color who had come to power, had evidenced their reluctance or their unwillingness to bring solace and new dimensions to our suffering. We say nothing. Most of us remain silent as a closure on race pride and race commitment. But when such an individual now sits in a place where not only is our oppression being more severely administered, but you also become a part of defining new ways in which to oppress people, then you sit squarely with a moral challenge of how far do you permit silence to prevail in the midst of this kind of severe cruelty. And I saw that with the expectations that so many had of Colin Powell, who had begun to abdicate to him, for them to have to understand we must cease this place of silence, we must cease our abdication to him and the power that he represented, and declare that the king has no clothes, and get on with the business of finding others who would come to our need and to our deliverance.
So you said that about Powell, and Secretary of State Powell he's welcome to his opinions, and then didn't he say something about that you weren't quite his favorite calypso singer? Yellow Man was
Yes.
his favorite?
No, I think he said that Sparrow.
Sparrow, that's right.
Sparrow was his favorite.
Yeah.
And I found Colin Powell to be very clever. Certainly the way in which to treat any negative criticism would be to show tolerance
Yeah.
for the person who has made the criticism. And sometimes that tolerance, or that image of tolerance, can carry an air of arrogance and try to frame your adversary into some place of no value. And to say, he's not my favorite calypso singer, was to try to relegate my thoughts and my intellect and my knowledge and my feeling about this journey of struggle in our world as coming from a place that has no authority and therefore has not the right to make commentary on governance. And I took exception to that and was given the platform of a very important national talk show to have rebuttal. And I have great reverence for the art of music and singing. I find it one of the most powerful weapons in the world, and I certainly have a deep and abiding love and affection for what calypsonians have brought to us, because it was in my youth and my childhood and in a place where there was absence of education that almost all the knowledge we had about current affairs and about political affairs and other social interests, we only knew through the articulation of what calypso singers sang.
Because it was really a form of folk music, right?
Not only a form of folk music, it was a living newspaper. They were the couriers, like the town criers in old days of old England. You listened to the town crier to tell you the news of the day and what was happening in the kingdom. And calypsonians did that for us as young children people living in the 1920s and 30s in the Caribbean. The first time I heard of what was going on with the throne in England and King Edward's abdication was through a calypsonian who sang, it was love, love alone, caused King Edward to leave the throne. It was love, 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 love alone, caused King Edward to leave the throne. I don't know what Miss Simpson got in she born that made the poor boy give up the throne. It was love, 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 love alone, caused King. And right away we said, something is wrong with the crown. There's a problem here. Thank you for being our APUPY service, you wonderful calypsonians.
That is fascinating.
But having said that, because that became rooted in my own choice of songs that eventually found favor with public appreciation. But those who would try to dismiss artists as citizens who have no right to thought, and have no right to criticize, and no right to move into places of complicated exchange and debate and negotiation, is to render us into being a nothing and into a place of nothingness, when in fact it is precisely people who do not come from those places who are mandated with the responsibility and the right to critique and to challenge until they hear a truth that's spoken in a way in which they can deal with the appreciation of how governance is being put upon us. And it was, I think, Teddy Roosevelt who once said that when the state begins to dismantle our, our instruments of governance and our Constitution. It is the responsibility of every citizen to not only let their voices be heard, but those of us who do not do that should be charged with patriotic treason.
Patriotic treason, I love that phrase. And
I
Teddy
do too.
Roosevelt, of course, is a good old Republican.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a political
So was
question.
Lincoln.
And so was Lincoln. Why do you think it is that the United States government, if not the United States country, often has such a, people have such a negative opinion of it? Is it just the Iraq War? Is it just George W. Bush?
I think the Iraq War and George W. Bush is a very serious part of the fueling of that disappointment that peoples in the world feel about America. I think it was also Desert Storm. I think it was also a host of things that we've done. I also think it has to do with our rather silent but significant American presence bombing villages in Colombia, South America. It's where our military serves in many places in the world, doing a lot of mischief to people in different parts of the world that we hear nothing about. We have that presence. But let me say this, that shortly after the Second World War, I think no nation on the face of the earth or in human history could have been more revered and more embraced than was the United States of America, by Europeans, by Africans, by Asians, by people from Latin America. Because this struggle for democracy that took place in the conflict with fascism was really quite centrally viewed as a struggle for democracy and freedoms of the peoples of the world. And almost all peoples bought into that. And America was clearly at the head of this mission. It was embraced also by other nations, England and France and Holland, all those who were our allies, who said they were also for democracy. And certainly central to that fact was that it was a severe and final blow towards any knowledge, any inference of race supremacy that had been uttered by Hitler. When the war ended, the rewards that were expected by all the people who had those expectations, the rewards did not fulfill themselves. They did not come into being. England went back to colonial governance. Therefore, it lied to the colonial people. And America went back to business as usual. The law stayed segregated. We still couldn't vote. Celebration of victory, and certainly no reward. The nation evidenced no such benevolence. And you have to understand that Vietnam, many places in the world which sought to have their freedom and to participate in this new expectation of world democracy, looked to America for us to be at the helm of the support of their Ho Chi Minh was a great student of Jeffersonian democracy.
Ho Chi Minh, of course, was the leader of the revolutionary Vietnamese.
Yes, and he studied at the Sorbonne in France, a man of enormous intellect. And he was a historian and loved America and had great expectations of this country when it came time for Vietnamese liberation. They always fought the Chinese, they fought the Japanese.
Right.
They'd been in a battle for centuries for their liberation, and now they finally defeated the French. And if you read the Vietnamese Constitution, its preamble reads exactly as our own, because he framed it that way. We were the model. And when the United States stepped in to replace a defeated France, to continue to cruelly punish the people of Vietnam, they turned against us. And the same was in Africa, in Kenya, in South Africa, where we openly agreed with the system of apartheid and the oppression of South Africans. So America began to yield this image that was quite contrary to global expectation. In the face of the fact that we put what we had, the Marshall Plan, into Europe and helped rebuild that continent in magnificent ways that put Europeans in tremendous place of obligation.
So it wasn't just negative U.S. foreign policy.
No. And as a matter of fact, I think what America is experiencing out of Europeans, a lot of people said, oh, the Europeans really hate us. They're not expressing hate for us. They're expressing really a severe, severe, severe disappointment in having blurred and betrayed the image that they always embraced who and what they thought America represented. And the same thing goes for the peoples in Africa. And I think that we are in a struggle, not only for image, but we are desperately caught up in a struggle for our soul as a nation. Dr. King said in the last days before he died, Harry, I'm afraid that with all that we've been through and all that we've struggled for, I am afraid we have come to the realization that we are integrating into a burning house.
A burning house. What did he mean by that?
He meant by that somehow America was now expressing a moral impotence towards coming to the grander mission of protecting democracy to its fullest bloom and embracing citizens of the world as whole, and that diversity was important to human existence rather than an alienation of diversity. And when I asked him, well, how do we correct that? He said, we have no choice but to become firemen. And I now find myself sitting here with hose in hand, with a fire truck, waiting to douse out these flames of torture that exist all over this, the flames of oppression that we're fanning everywhere. War is not the solution, and we seem to consistently fail to understand that fact. It'll lead us nowhere, and it is going to be more wars yet to come. I'm looking very nervously at what's going on in Syria and Lebanon and what's going on in Iran and what we're saying about North Korea. It isn't that these places should not be viewed with concern and caution, but have we not the intelligence nor the capacity to move to other instruments in the way in which we contain this and come to a more harmonious place? Is it only through war? I think we have to think again.
And yet, I don't think you're a pacifist. You fought in World War II proudly, fighting fascism, and in my research for this interview, I read about your mother, that your mother, when you were being raised, made sure that every night when you put your head on the pillow that you had done something to fight injustice during the day. Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
Well, and then in World War II, I believe you enlisted in the United States Navy in order to help fight fascism. So
yes.
Obviously you're not a pacifist in the sense that you believe that sometimes one must fight evil, regrettably perhaps, with violence. And yet you're saying now that war is not the answer. George W. Bush, of course, said war is the only way that we can rid the world of the new Hitler in Saddam Hussein. My question to you is, how do people decide? Do they believe George W. Bush? Do they believe Harry Belafonte on questions of war? How do we decide when war is the right solution and when it's not?
I think history has been remarkably generous in giving us examples that we consistently look away from. I don't think, excuse me, I don't think empires were ever more positioned to destroy this entire planet than the animosity that existed between the forces of the West and the forces of the East, between Russia, the Soviet Union, and the United States, between communism and capitalism. The severity of the extremes of these forces coming together for the control of the hearts and minds of man, human beings, was at its severest in our historic experience. And yet, that conflict was resolved without one shot being fired. Communism capitulated. It broke away. It imploded. It failed by its own weight of evil. The second example was apartheid in South Africa. No peoples could have been more cruelly and harshly treated by any society in our history than the apartheid regime treated its black African citizens. And what should have been the bloodbath of the century, by all measure and thought, was a transformation that took place where not one shot was fired. And the man who emerged from that conflict was the most profound and one of the most wonderful moral voices history had ever known, Nelson Mandela. With these two illustrations of the absence of war transforming societies of evil into a new and a wonderful opportunity at democracy, and is on the march to try to do so peacefully, is a far greater illustration of what we can achieve by what will come out of Iraq and what will come out of the other places that we have so cruelly punished with the use of wars of with weapons of mass destruction. So I don't think I stand unrewarded from history's evidence that there are ways in which nonviolence can successfully move the human family to a new and a more promising future.
We could sit here and talk, I'm sure, for hours and hours, but I'm going to ask you just one last question. It's said that one time an interviewer asked Bob Dylan, you've met everybody, who have you not met that you would have liked to have met? Bob Dylan. And Dylan said instantly, Bob Marley. Marley had died by then. You have known and worked with Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, virtually all of the great entertainers, especially in the music business. So I ask you the same question. Is there anybody that you have not had the pleasure of meeting that you would like to meet, that you can think of?
Well, not during the period of my own history. But certainly if I were able to have complete control over all that, I would have loved to have been sitting in a room when the white founding fathers of the Constitution of this country were in the midst of the debate. I would have welcomed with tremendous relish the opportunity to listen to how that wisdom bounced around that room to arrive at the document that finally came out of that struggle, and to witness the fact that this great thing could have taken place in the midst of one of the most cruel experiences in human history, slavery. What an ambivalence, what a conflict. How could such thought emerge from men who were in the practice of slavery?
Themselves,
yes. What a rather curious, wondrous thing that happened here. And how interesting that we now, the descendants of all that, are still struggling to protect the prophecy of that proclamation. And here struggling for it not to be destroyed by the slave, both by the slaver and those who are the inheritors of the slave history. I would love to have been around that room just to hear it bounce off the wall.
Harry Belafonte, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this special edition of Spotlight, an interview with Harry Belafonte, the singer, the actor, the activist, and we are very proud to say a board member here at Link TV. My name is Mark Hertzgaard, the political correspondent here at Link TV. Thank you very much for joining us.